Committee on the Judiciary, Subcommittee on the Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess to the subcommittee at any time. I welcome everyone to today's hearing on discrimination and violence against Asian Americans. Before we begin this meeting, I would like to ask that we have a moment of silence in memory of the individuals tragically killed, murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you. I'd like to remind members that we have established an email address and distribution list dedicated to circulating exhibits, motions, or other written materials that members may want to offer as part of our hearing today. If you'd like to submit those materials, the site is judiciary.docs@mail.house.gov. We will distribute them to members and staff as quickly as possible. I also ask unanimous consent that our Judiciary Committee colleagues, Representatives Jha, Paul, and Lou, participate in today's hearing. Hearing no objection, I welcome them to our subcommittee. They'll be able to question our witnesses if they are yielded time by subcommittee members. Finally, I would ask all members, both those in person and those appearing remotely, to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. This will help prevent feedback, other technical issues, and unmute yourself when you are recognized. I'll now recognize myself for an opening statement. While there's still many details to be learned about Tuesday's horrific shootings in Atlanta that left 8 people dead, 6 of them reportedly of Asian descent, one thing is certain. For many Asian Americans, Tuesday's shocking events felt like the inevitable culmination of a year in which there were nearly 3,800 reported incidents of anti-Asian hate incidents that grew increasingly more violent over time as the COVID-19 pandemic worsened, and some people wrongly blamed Asian Americans, or implied such by calling it the China virus. These incidents include cases of verbal harassment, being spat at, slapped in the face, lit on fire, slashed with a box cutter, or shoved violently to the ground. And that number of reported incidents is just likely the tip of the iceberg. I want to make clear that all Asian Americans who are understandably feeling hurt and afraid right now and wondering whether anyone else in America cares, that Congress sees you, we stand with you, and we will do everything in our power to protect you. Anti-Asian hate did not begin with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will not end when the pandemic is over. All the pandemic did was exacerbate latent anti-Asian prejudices that have long and ugly history in America. It's also provided an excuse for some to act on those prejudices. In fact, there have been discrimination against lots of people in this country, and all of that has been exacerbated. But the Asian situation has been the most extreme. Pandemics, wars, geopolitical tensions, and economic competition, and the fear and resentment that these situations create have historically provided the conditions for anti-Asian racism and xenophobia to take root, often leading to tragic consequences for Asian Americans. For example, social and economic resentment against Chinese laborers in the 1800s led to the enactment of Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which barred nearly all immigration from China. And the 1924 Immigration Act effectively barred immigration from all Asian countries. In 1942, the United States government committed the most sweeping violation of civil liberties in American history, other than slavery itself, when it ordered the forced internment of 120,000 Japanese Americans, many of them second and third generation Americans, during the Second World War, based not on any legitimate national security concerns, but on the racist and xenophobic assumption that Americans of Japanese ancestry would be disloyal. In 1982, Chinese-American Vincent Chin was beaten to death by 2 white auto workers because his attackers thought he was Japanese, and therefore responsible for the decline of U.S. automobile industry. On September 15, 2001, Balbir Singh Sodhi, a Sikh gas station owner in Arizona, was murdered by a man who blamed him for the 9/11 terrorist attacks. To this list, we now add the most recent victims of anti-Asian hate, as Asian Americans are wrongfully blamed for the COVID-19 pandemic. While many of the recent anti-Asian incidents may not meet legal definition of hate crime, these attacks nonetheless create an unacceptable environment of fear and terror in Asian American communities. Attacks like the one on 84-year-old Visha Ratanapakdi on January 28 of this year was on a walk in his neighborhood. He was walking in his neighborhood and was violently slammed to the ground. He died a few days later from the brain trauma that he sustained. I'd now like to play a video of that attack caught by a nearby surveillance camera. Sadly, this incident was one of several recent ones that where elderly Asian Americans were similarly knocked violently to the ground. Left unchecked, racist attitudes stoked by racist rhetoric can have deadly consequences for innocent people, as we've just witnessed in that sad clip. In such a fraught time as the ones we're living in, it is incumbent on all public officials, elected or otherwise, and public figures to speak out against the irrational hatreds and prejudices that could overtake society in the face of a national emergency. In short, words matter. Indeed, the wrong words can be very harmful. Leaders who promote stereotypes to use rhetoric aimed at a particular ethnic or racial group can cause increases in levels of discrimination or violence directed against that group. When politicians use terms like China virus or Kung flu or refer to COVID-19 as the effect, to refer to COVID-19 as the effect, intentional or not, of putting a target on the backs of all Asian Americans. Used the right way, however, words from our leaders can help calm fears, reassure those feeling under threat, and remind everyone that we all share the same basic dignity as human beings and that we should treat each other accordingly. Thankfully, we have two panels of witnesses who can help show us the way forward and eagerly await their testimony. As best we can tell, the last time there was a congressional hearing specifically focused on anti-Asian hate was in 1987, before this subcommittee. That hearing took place during another time when economic and social problems were being blamed on an Asian country and, by unfair extension, Asian Americans. We can't ever forget Asian Americans, not Asians, Asian Americans. Clearly, more work needs to be done. Let us use this hearing as a chance to do better.